The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Good morning, everybody. As you all know, and maybe some of the people online probably do too, I'm Phyllis Amenda, and I am married to the Reverend Lee Harding from the United Methodist tradition, and together we're going to talk today about the changes in the United Methodist Church over the last years. And then at the end, that's Lee's part, she's Methodist. And then at the end, I'm going to bring some parallels with what has happened in the Episcopal Church and close it up. So the Reverend Lee Harding is the chaplain at the United Methodist Homes Hilltop campus. And are you still chaplain coordinator for the home? You know, so anyway, but she's chaplain, and she's also been very active in all kinds of denominational committees. So if there's anybody in the area who can speak to this, it's Lee. So no further ado.
So the handout is a timeline of what has happened here in the United Methodist Church. And when you see references to the United Methodist Book of Discipline, this is the book that United Methodist clergy live and die by. I don't even know when I first became aware of the United Methodist Book of Discipline, but it had to have been after 1970, somewhere along in there. You'll see how that's important here momentarily. In 1972, the United Methodist Social Principles, which are at the very beginning of the Book of Discipline, they are not chargeable. They're not, you don't have to follow them. They're just guidelines on interacting with the world. There's categories on abortion. There's category on the death penalty. There's categories on serving in the military, and etc. And in 1972, that was the very first time that a statement was included about homosexuality. And it says, "We do not condone the practice of homosexuality and consider it incompatible with Christian teaching." And then they added the phrase, "Persons of homosexual orientation are persons of sacred worth." I said, talk about speaking out of both sides of your mouth. Anyway, in 1972, I probably was in youth group at church with Carl and Wilma as my youth leaders. And I remember, I don't remember what year it was, but they did a sex education class from the Christian perspective. And I remember at the time they were saying, and there were about 20 of us, 20, 21, and saying that, 10% of the population are gay. And I looked around the room and I thought, well, I wonder who the two are. And little did I know then that it was my brother and I. So true enough, it was the 10%. But, there's just something about homosexuality at the time and being a lesbian in the 1970s. You just said, no, that's not possible. I didn't come out to myself until I was in seminary, which is significant eventually here. Okay. In 1980, they failed to pass the phrase that no self-avowed practicing homosexual shall be ordained, but they changed their minds in 1984 and put it in there. No self-avowed practicing homosexuals will be ordained or serve as clergy. And they inserted the phrase fidelity in marriage and celibacy in singleness. People have asked me, very rarely, but I know Phyllis has asked, how did I get through ordination? If I came out while I was in seminary, how did I get through the ordination process knowing full well that that statement was in there? I said, well, in my ordination papers, I wrote with God's help. Well, with God's help, I met Phyllis, Okay. And also, once they added the definition of what a self-avowed practicing homosexual is, and I read the footnote last night, the definition is coming out to a bishop,
a DS,
somebody on the board of ordained ministry, and one other person. I never came out to any of those people. And when I served on the board of ordained ministry, there was a debate as to whether we should ask people if they're gay or not. And it's, no, we don't need to ask people if they're gay. We don't ask people, every candidate, are you heterosexual? It's just not something you're going to do. It was kind of a don't ask, don't tell period. Very much so. In 1996, that's when I was in seminary, and General Conference occurred in Denver where I was going to seminary. So I had the opportunity to attend our General Conference. Our General Conference takes place every 4 years, with one exception, and that was the year 2020. Gee, something happened in 2020. We just had the 2020 General Conference in 2024. Yeah, it gets confusing, I know. So you'll notice that the book of discipline that I have is dated 2016. It's because the 2020 hasn't been printed yet, or it's in process of being printed. You can now download it, but there's no hard copy yet that I've decided to purchase. So in 1996, here I am, a seminarian. Can't remember if I'd come out to myself yet or not. I think it was the next summer. But anyway, attending General Conference. And there were all kinds of protests. You would see rainbow flags. You would see rainbow. This shirt hadn't come out yet, and Reconciling Ministries Network wasn't called that yet. It was something else. Reconciling United Methodists, I think. And my eyes started opening up to having grown up in this area and kind of being middle of the road theologically, and going to Denver to the Iliff School of Theology and finding out that there's new ways to understand scripture that are much more liberating. Liberal theology was probably the name of the kind of education I got. And it being that far away from here is what opened the door to me to be able to come out to myself. They required counseling for all of us. We were on the campus of Denver University, and DU has a psychology department, and they needed guinea pigs. So they had the seminarians all either take a group therapy, family therapy, or individual therapy. And I chose individual therapy on stress management. And on the very last day, I said, but if I don't start dealing with the issues that are causing this stress, all of this stress management's for nothing. So I continued on with therapy, and that's when I started to really integrate who I was into the issues. My initial response was, so this church that has supported me every step of the way, if they found out this one thing about me that's been true my entire life, is all for naught? In talking with a professor who was also gay clergy, found out there is a way for it, and it's that don't ask, don't tell. Is it easy? No, by no means is it easy. As Phyllis found out when we first met, she was interviewed on the television wearing a pride shirt of some sort. And I said, if you're going to be doing that, we can't be together. And so my being in the closet made her be in the closet. And it was difficult there for a few years. One of the major breakthroughs in 1996 was the Denver 15. 15 bishops submitted a letter to the Denver Post, of all places to send it, to the Denver Post, declaring homosexuality in the church to be inclusive in what Jesus would have wanted. It's the first time that the bishops did not speak together as one voice. And it was a huge, huge difference for the church. I've listed the names of those who were those 15 bishops. All of them now are either retired or deceased. The significant ones, two of them stand out. Marianne Swenson, she was the bishop of the Denver area when I was in seminary. Her office was literally directly across the street from the seminary. And I could go over and chat with Bishop Swenson anytime I wanted to. And Bishop Susan Morrison is the bishop who ordained me in 1997 and 1999, both deacon and then elder. Also at that conference, good at United Methodist, First Lady Hillary Clinton spoke. And it was one of the first times I heard her speak in person. I was actually at conference that day, and she received a resounding applause. And she's the one who gave us the phrase, open the doors. Throw open the doors of our churches and welcome in those whom John Wesley sought out. So open the doors became part of our little phrase. The next major change came in 2004 when chargeable offenses were related to homosexuality were added to the Book of Discipline. Those chargeable offenses included officiating at same-sex marriages and holy unions. Some of you might remember Steve Heiss from Tabernacle. Steve wrote a piece about having officiated at his daughter's wedding. And somebody somewhere who read it decided to present it to our then bishop. And Steve had to go through this whole church trial. And it was finally decided that he didn't actually state it to a bishop, that it was kind of roundabout way. He ended up keeping his credentials, but it really clouded a lot of things. I myself officiated at my cousin's wedding. And so in my report, I didn't list the husband and wife. I listed the two last names, kind of like doing the Harding Amenda wedding. Who are they? Nobody questioned it. Nobody even asked. And all I asked my cousin was just don't put my name in the newspaper or on Facebook when you say who, officiated, because it doesn't matter. It did matter, but it didn't matter. And I've said after we got married is all through, Steve said he would have married us years ago. And I said, I was willing to bend the rules, but not break them, The Western jurisdiction, which is obviously out toward California, elected the first female bishop who was married to another woman, and that was the Reverend Karen Oliveto. Somebody from Texas tried to bring her up on charges, but nobody in California or from her home conference would bring her up on charges. And the ruling was that somebody from another conference with just circumstantial evidence cannot bring up charges against somebody they don't know personally. So Karen Oliveto, now retired, kind of began to break the way for the rest of us. In 2019, again, keeping this in mind, it's right before the pandemic that we didn't know was coming. The special general conference passed what they called the traditional plan. The original plan was that the liberals would all break off and go start their own denomination. The liberals all said, but if we just simply compromise, there's no reason why we can't all fall under one umbrella. We're not going anywhere. And so, sure enough, we didn't go anywhere. It was the Wesleyan Covenant Association that finally decided to take and break from the United Methodist Church, and they started their own denomination that was called the Global Methodist. Now, I know Glenn referred to me as a Methodist. You will almost always hear me say I am a United Methodist. That word united is very important to those of us who are UM. In 1968, the United Evangelical Brethren and the Methodist Church joined together to become United Methodist. So that's an important piece. And now with the Global Methodist, who have taken the name Methodist and run with it, that united is even more important to those of us who are UM. Many congregations have disaffiliated, much as they did in the Episcopal Church, and have joined either a non-denominational conservative something church or the Global Methodist. And several of my friends have become Global Methodist, just here in this area. Also in 2022, the Western jurisdiction again ordained and elected to the episcopacy Cedric Bridgeforth as the first male bishop to be married to another male. And then the earth-shattering moment came May 1st, 2024. I was watching General Conference online that was held in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we were 10 minutes from a lunch break. So I turned off my computer, went and got my lunch, and I came back to a text message from Phyllis that said, "It passed, will you marry me?" And I went, what? Because all those years, 96, 1980, 1996, every year, there's been this big argument back and forth between those who wanted to keep restrictions on the gays and the lesbians, and those from Africa and other European countries for places where homosexuality is still punishable by prison. And then there's those of us who would wear our rainbow stoles and parade around saying all means all. And I'm expecting this huge debate 10 minutes before lunch. There's no way this is going to pass. What I didn't understand and wasn't aware is that the issue had been put on the consent calendar, and it passed without so much as a discussion, and with a vote of 500 something to 91. 692. Yeah, there you go. 692 to 51. Yeah, there you go. Just overwhelmingly passed. So I get back to my office, and here's this text from Phyllis, and of course I said yes, and started looking up what happened, and sent a message to my good friend Michelle, who was attending General Conference, and I said, it really did pass? And she said, yeah. And I said, so when can I get married? She goes, when do you want to get married? I said, no, my question is this effective immediately? Or do I have to wait till the first of the year? And she said, oh, no, you can get married as soon as General Conference ends Friday night. I said, well, I'm not quite going to do it Friday night when, you're back in town. But 3 months later, on August 3rd, we were able to be married. So we put a wedding together relatively quickly.
She didn't sleep for 2 days.
That's beside the point. Part of what's helped me through the years is the don't ask, don't tell. Part of what's helped me through the years is the Reconciling Ministries Network, reading a number of books on how the word homosexuality got even into the Bible. And 46. In 19, yeah, and it's like, that's not an original word. That's not the word translated from the Greek. That was added later. And what is it that it really means to us as Christians? And, just being comfortable in my own skin has helped tremendously. And getting to the point where I can be free to be who I am.
I have
another question. Yeah.
Is there, when you talked about Global Methodists and
yes,
people in this area, is there a church here locally?
There's quite a few.
Oh, there's a number of them.
Oh, yes.
Oh, there are.
Yeah.
Mostly the smaller country churches.
Yeah.
Whittemore Hill and Endicott became global. Campville United Methodist that I served back 25 years ago is now Global Methodist.
McKendree and Candor is Global Methodist.
Global Methodist. Franklin Forks is global. Choconut, West Shenango went non-denominational. That's the one out near the airport. Yeah.
And I know we have a friend named Sue, who's a retired United Methodist pastor who now lives down near New Milford in Pennsylvania. And She told me that she said that she tried out both of the local Methodist churches and they had both gone global. And Sue is as liberal as they come.
Yes.
And she is now a very happy Episcopalian. And serving because
There's no United Methodist Church.
because there's no United Methodist Church, and the Episcopal Church in New Milford has a resident gay clergy. So she's been very welcome. Her and her husband have been very welcome there. What I wanted to mention is just to remind us, and not everybody lived through this, and those of us who did probably have tried to forget it, but the arc of the United Methodist Church is not all that different from the arc of the Episcopal Church 15 years earlier. The Episcopal Church, gays and lesbians through a group called Integrity, have been fighting for equal place with marriage and in the clergy since 1976. And as time went on, some dioceses would accept gay clergy, some wouldn't. But there became a number of gay clergy. And the you-know-what hit the fan, though, in 2003 when I'm going blank on his name. Gene Robinson.
Gene Robinson.
I was going to say, I can see his picture in front of my face. Gene Robinson was elected to be the Bishop of New Hampshire. And literally all hell broke loose. And he had been at that point in a committed relationship for a good many years, was still on very good speaking terms with his ex-wife and his kids. And is a wonderful man. And so at that point, there had already been a lot of rumblings from more conservative members of the Episcopal Church. First of all, over the ordination of women. An anniversary of what's called the Philadelphia 11, the 50th anniversary of their ordination in 1974, happened just in the last few months. On my timeline, that means there's been tons of posts because I follow a lot of Episcopal history. And also I have connections with one of the Philadelphia 11. One of the women was Catherine Swanson, whose husband, George Swanson, was an Episcopal priest. And when I was a small child, George was my rector in Coalinga, California. And Catherine, she had one son who was real close to my age. We used to play together a lot. They lived a few blocks from us at the parsonage and rectory. I was trying to think, what denomination am I today? And then she and my mom were pregnant at the same time with her second children, and William and my sister Lorraine were born also within a few months of each other. So, but we lost touch with them after they left Coalinga around 1967, 68. And then, years later, she's one of the Philadelphia 11. I've met at least one or two other of those ladies, but several of them are no longer with us, including Catherine, and most of them are now certainly retired. It's been 50 years, and a lot of them weren't all that young then. And so anyhow, so there was a lot of complaints over that. There was a lot of complaints about the prayer book from 1979. There were already churches who had left the Episcopal Church and over those issues. There were whole dioceses that would not ordain women, including the Diocese of San Joaquin, where I grew up in California. And then when Gene was consecrated bishop, that was just one straw too many for many of the conservatives. And at that point, the list of acronyms is amazingly long and horribly confusing, so I won't go into it, but various groups began to break off. And as Lee mentioned about the Africans, the reason I asked her to mention that was in the Methodists, like as before in the Episcopalians, the one key factor in this, in fact, were conservative African bishops that supported the schismatics. In the Methodist Church, it was the African bishops for many years that provided many of the decisive votes against
United.
inclusion, right?
United.
United Methodist Church, sorry. Yeah, that's been a bugaboo for the last 23 years. It was the African bishops that would come to General Conference. I mean, they're full members.
Yeah.
And throw wrenches into all kinds of, work. So, and in the Episcopal Church, it was a number of African bishops that offered to take under their episcopacy these American churches that broke away. And if you didn't need more fuel on the fire, the election of Catherine Jefferts Schori as the first female primate in the Anglican Communion in 2006 was also, I mean, that was just, if they needed yet another straw to break the camel's back, that was it. So as they broke away and they formed these new organizations, the Global Methodists, have their counterpart with the American, the Anglican Church in North America, the ACNA, of which there are 2 ACNA parishes in this area, St. Andrew's in Vestal, and I think they're still calling themselves Good Shepherd. They bought the old St. Andrew's RC in Conklin. And so, we went through it here. I was diocesan delegate in those years. And I remember the first convention after all of the conservatives had left, and it was lovely. There were no arguments anymore. We discussed different ways and different approaches to sharing the love of God, but we did not have any arguments about who was included in the love of God. And it was wonderful. As I think Lee will find her conference and her next conferences to be remarkably peaceful. As everybody sorts themselves out. And one other commonality, as she was going, and I read that timeline and looking at the Episcopal timeline and thinking they followed many of the same steps, and many of the same kinds of people were involved. And then remembered something I had read many years ago, and unfortunately I could not find it online, but both schisms were bought and paid for by the same people. The Institute on Religion and Democracy is a conservative think tank that has donated lots of money on both the Methodist and Episcopal issues. And a lot of it to bishops in Africa, both Methodist bishops and Episcopal bishops. And that's been their goal, they want to bring all of the mainline denominations into orthodoxy. And how do they define orthodoxy? As far as I can tell, and I've studied them, only on the gay issue. There's no other, do we recite the creeds and wholeheartedly give our affirmation to the creeds as found traditionally, the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed? That's not the issue. Do we believe in the scriptures as all priests take vows to, in their ordinations, and the bishops? That's not the issue. The issue is strictly homosexuality. And that is exactly the marker for these people who seem to have some very deep pockets from some very wealthy conservatives. And their goal was to take over the Episcopal Church and the Methodist Church, and in both cases, they lost in the sense that it was their followers who left and formed new denominations. But both schisms were bought and paid for to a large extent by the same people. And it's hard to find documentation on that. As I said, the articles I read a number of years ago, I could not find online last night, but, it hasn't changed. So I don't know who they'll go for next. You know, now that they've broken up 2 denominations, I don't know who's on their list, for the next week.
Sure, there is one.
I'm probably the Presbyterians would be my guess, but I don't know.
They've already done it.
They've already done it too, yeah.
They've already had a lot of issues too.
The church I used to go to left and became a community church.
Yeah.
Extremely conservative.
Yeah, and I think there's been a number of Episcopal churches, I mean Presbyterian churches, PCUSA, which is the mainline group, have joined the PCA, the Presbyterian Church in America, which is very conservative.
So, anybody have questions
Yeah, and my
for either of us?
Yeah, my only other comment is I can't wait to see how the Global Methodists are going to split 6 ways from Sunday, as the ACNA is in the process of doing.
Oh, wow.
I have one comment and then a question.
Okay.
My comment is if they're going to go after, charges based on sexual activity, then when are they going to start pressing charges on, adultery? That being said, because, a sin is a sin, yes, if that's how you're going to look at it. So let's go after some others as well. And of course, I'm saying that facetiously, but it seems so unbelievable that that's where they're choosing to go. The other thing is, you brought up a point that really I'm very interested in, and that is the issue of the word homosexual being added to the Bible. And in terms of the people that you met who scripturally allowed you to feel comfortable with who you are, I wish more of that was shared for all of us. My daughter came out in 2006, I guess it was. And, I raised her as a Christian, and she has since left the church.
And my brother did too.
Which breaks my heart. Yep. And what do I have to stand on in terms of Christian facts that can help her or others, or even defend the issue to other people who say, yeah, but it says in the Bible, to me, and that would really be helpful.
I can connect you with some resources. You can also have your daughter call me. That's fine. I'd talk with her.
Yeah, there's quite a few books.
Yeah, what
on
the Bible
stuff
really
says
says
about homosexuality is an excellent book.
Excellent.
And some of the,
I'll look up the author.
yeah, some of the older stuff by Virginia Mollenkott is also, Who is My Neighbor? By
It's the title of the
Scalzone.
book, yeah.
The title of the book is Who is My Neighbor by Leah Scalzone, is also a classic. Because I'm thinking of all the stuff I read when I came out. And that
Stranger
was
at the Gate.
Stranger at the Gate by Mel White. Is that Mel White's book?
Mhm.
Mel White used to be
The ghostwriter.
a ghostwriter for people like Falwell, Pat Robertson, et
Until it
cetera,
came out gay.
until he came out. And the last time I saw Mel was on The Amazing Race, of all
Oh,
places.
boy.
He and his son did The Amazing Race, but yeah, but that's a good one. And I remember reading one by a former Catholic priest that had come out, and I can't remember the title of it. But there's quite a few books, and if you'd like, Diane, I can make a list for you. It used to be there was a page on the Diocese of LA's website. They had a page for inclusion that had, that was part of their website on gay and lesbian issues, and they had a whole page of resources. I don't know if it's still there because I haven't looked at it in probably 15 years. But I know that they did. But if you just look up, but I can get you some sources. I'm trying to think of a good search parameter that wouldn't put a lot of haters, stuff on there. But there's a lot of good books out there. And I know there's more recent ones. And also, if you follow on social media or read any books by Diana Butler Bass, She doesn't, that's not her focus is the gay issue, but she's extremely inclusive, and her father was gay. And every coming out day, she has often published an essay she wrote about discovering that her father was gay and how that affected her family.
I know from my perspective, I feel like, excuse me, I would really like something scriptural to be able to.
Yeah, there's the stuff we've given you
What the Bible really says.
says, yeah.
That would be very helpful.
And that one
So
is
thank you.
the most helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
There's also a lot of online resources. If you just look up clobber passages, it'll come up and deal with those.
And actually,
specific.
the Reconciling Ministries Network has on their website resources. You click on resources, it'll list some of these books. It'll
rmn.org, right?
United Methodist, but
Is it rmn.org?
or
just
you have to
put in-
type in more than that, but
Type in Reconciling Ministries
Ministries
Network and you'll get it. Yes, Masha.
thank you very much.
No, I was just gonna make a comment here, in terms of Trinity. We were involved, many of us, Noreen Surner, when she was.
Oh, right.
Uh-huh.
Person, minister here, gave a very interesting forum, or I guess, or several, talking about where nowhere in the Bible visits the word. But also we were involved with Jean Robinson, Trinity was, and in fact, some of us, I think, went to New Hampshire.
Yeah, because
Fear that there was gonna be shooting.
because he was already going to New Hampshire to become clergy there. And so she hadn't yet taken the post, but she'd accepted it. And so, yeah, there was a number of us, I didn't, but a number of people who went. And also Bishop Skip and Bishop Jean were very good friends. And so I know a couple of times when things were happening, Skip, come in for his minute visit or something and give us an update.
When I moved here, I was in New Jersey. Spung also, Bishop Spung, I think, was very active in all.
Yes, and he was very active in some of the early ordinations. David.
Many of you know that my wife spent 8 years in a convent, okay? And I guess there were a number of the old nuns that were gay, am I correct? That never came out of the closet.
Well, we call them particular friendships. That was the word for being
There
gay.
you go.
But, as I'm listening to all of this, I'm thinking 8 years of Catholic, grade school, and then I went to a girls' high school, then in the convent. Never did anybody direct me to a line in the Bible that indicated that homosexuality was not right, but we were always told by the nuns that it was a mortal sin. So, you didn't care if you committed the venials, you could run to confession, but you didn't want that mortal in case you died that night, you went to hell. I mean, that was the upbringing about this homosexuality issue.
Oh, wow.
So I just find it.
Well, and I finally got to the point where anybody who
Told me I was going to hell, I just look and say, I guess I'll be in good company. I mean,
I'll be happy to be with you.
I'll see you there.
In Genesis, doesn't it say, after God created the earth, he said, it is good?
It is good.
My question is, what 10% of the population
isn't good. Yeah.
Exactly. Any,
Yeah.
yes,
They can recall that he created man and woman in his image.
yes.
And that would include the 10% in my mind.
Yeah. Sharon?
I am the least experienced in terms of both the Episcopal Church and I was raised in what do you call a Marthoma church. It's an Eastern church in India. It's in full communion with the Episcopal Church. So, a lot of things are very common, but some of the things that we struggle with still are things like when I go back home, some of the things I still have to battle with is covering my head, right? That's
right.
where we are right now. We only, I want to say 2 years ago, had ordinations for deacons, not even priests, female deacons, not even priests. So I felt so much at home when I came here. yeah, when I went around like shopping for a church, that's what I Googled also, LGBTQ friendly churches. Because then I also didn't, me being an Indian, I didn't want to come into a space that would possibly be racist, or at that time in 2021, when I came, I think the abortion rights was like very strong. Talks about abortion rights. So that's how I found this church. So
Oh, excellent.
yeah, that's one thing. But I only, uh, so you had all these conferences, and I'm just wondering, were there, like you mentioned how the last one was like, there was no debate, everyone just like voted yes, like almost everyone just voted yes. But in the previous ones, were there a lot of discussions and, debates? Of course, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And it
A
didn't,
speech for, a speech against, and acrimonious and, oh,
personal attacks.
personal
and,
attacks, raised voices.
Yeah, it
It-
was pretty nasty.
It was a hard place to be.
And, yeah, because the day that, that May 1st, I had been at work all morning, and when I'm at work, I don't really check my phone. I'm not supposed to at all, so I don't generally do much. And I got off work and I looked, and I had a bunch of Facebook stuff, so I looked at it, and the first thing I saw was our friend Michelle Bogtrost, that she mentioned, Michelle, who was the pastor at that time at Central United Methodist in Endicott, and was a delegate to this
General conference.
the general conference. She just had a meme posted on her Facebook page that says, "Love wins." And I thought, my God, that cannot mean what I think it means.
It
Now you have to understand, as a non-Methodist, non-United Methodist, the United Methodist Church has broken my heart for the last 20 years. I don't trust them. And the individuals, yes, the denomination, no. And so I looked it up right there in my car before I went home. And indeed, it had passed. And that's when I sent the text. And I think my version of it was, "Did you see the news? Will you marry me?" And look it up, make sure it was true. Yes.
Also before it's.
And so we went out to dinner that night to celebrate with a notepad, started making notes like crazy. And I said, I don't think she slept for 2 weeks. Every time I woke up, she was already awake making notes on something. And every time I went to sleep, she was still up making notes. So anyhow, so after 23 years, we were able to finally get married on August 3rd. And which is, we've always considered ourselves married, but it's 9. Yes.
I guess, and part of what helped,
The last don't have those,
I serve as a chaplain in a place that is an equal opportunity employer as opposed to perhaps the local church. And I own my own house. We made sure my name was the only one on the deed. And I didn't have a committee coming in and checking out my house periodically. So there was a lot of little things along the way that just kind of fell into place.
And the fact that everybody likes her, so they weren't going to make trouble for her.
Another question. Can you speak to the fact that there are a lot of cultures that are really opposed to homosexuality? I think India is one country that,
A big contestation, we generally tend to think. I mean, of course, like larger politics today is very nationalistic, and it tends to uphold certain values over others. Like, so say, for example, heterosexuality is favored over anything else. But I think like people in the academic world will be able to say that probably the thing against homosexuality really came in during the colonial period through the British. Like that's when a lot of the laws were codified.
okay.
And it's only in 2019, I think, that there was a law that passed that decriminalized homosexuality.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was a law that was laid down during the British era. But when you're looking at ancient texts, even temple sculptures and things like that, you do have evidence that homosexuality was not, looked down upon. It was like accepted within society. Yeah.
I can't speak as much to those who are anti as pointing out some of the ones that have been a little more forthcoming with homosexuality, like Native Americans. The shamans were often homosexuals. it's been a part of society forever, no matter what people try to say.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Yep.
always.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and as far as some of these other countries, as Sharon said, a lot of it is, colonialism from Europe.
Yep.
Or Americans. But frankly, it's patriarchy. Homosexuality flies in the face of patriarchy. Men who do not need women and women who do not need men actually throw a big monkey wrench into your patriarchal, hierarchical society. And so when you look at people who are opposed, generally, that's why in the Episcopal Church, opposition to women priests is linked almost often arm in arm with opposition to homosexual priests, because it's all that patriarchal, gendered, hierarchical society that we see promulgated primarily by those on the right wing, not always, but mostly. And once you start throwing a monkey wrench into that by ordaining women, women can speak for God as much as men did through the Eucharist and through the sermon. Once you acknowledge that there are people who are perfectly fine not needing the other gender, it destroys that patriarchal society. And for most of us, probably in this room, that's a good thing, but it scares a lot of people. It's different. I mean, I'm 64, and a lot of times I find myself, struggling with the pronoun issue. It's not that I'm opposed to people using the pronouns. It's just habits that I've spent 60 years developing, and I am now trying to let go. And, like the trans issue, Lee and I went out with a trans couple once who was in the process of transitioning. And what got funnier is not only were we trying to get the pronouns straight, they were screwing up the pronouns, and the more wine we drank, the more the pronouns were messed up. And we just kept laughing because
Might as well.
we might as well, but it was again,
Well,
we're all of the same age and or more, and it's just trying to change 50 years of cultural usage to reflect the reality we see before us.
my cousin, I remember when she was born, and now uses they, them, and it just makes my head swim. I suppose if I'd been born at a different time, I might have been they, them, but I said, I've been female for better than 60 years. Let's just keep it that way.
Yeah, and and even your cousin has never tried to explain it to her grandfather,
That's right.
who's extremely conservative, United Methodist.
He's probably global now.
He's probably global now. He probably is. And she never even bothered to explain it to her grandfather because he wasn't going to get it.
He's not going to get it.
Yeah, Ken.
There is hope. I know a trans woman who is 68.
Yep.
And last year, her 95-year-old father addressed her Christmas card to Ms.
Wow.
Perkins.
Going back to a point that you made, Phyllis, about the patriarchy, there is, I think, a deeper original sin in Christian church, not in Christian faith. And that's an important distinction. The Christian church, for practically all of its 2,000-year history, had what I can only describe as a very unhealthy relationship with anything sexual.
Yes.
Anything sexual. It's even barely tolerated in a heterosexual married couple if it's for procreation.
Right.
Very unhealthy, and you go back to St. Paul, I think that's where it starts. And it has been abused and misused to exclude people, to hurt people, to kill people, you name it, to do ugly things to people ever since. And only in the last 20, 25 years are we coming to grips with it's the church not a faith.
Yeah.
And it's the faith that we should be about.
Amen.
Thank you.
And and on that note, since we've gone past our 12:15 time, would you like to close us in prayer, since you're the pastor?
Holy and Almighty God, we do give you thanks for the wide variety of your creation, for all of us here gathered, and for everyone everywhere. Male, female, bisexual, asexual, homosexual, lesbian, gay, we're all just friendly people. May we each reflect your image in the way you have created us to be. In your holy name.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Very